Alien fucking Resurrection. How do you talk about this movie? I mean, I don't know how. This is... I mean, it's the strangest film in all of the series. It's the weirdest one. I mean, it's the hardest one to talk about by far. It's such a weird movie. Its existence is insane. Because you have to understand, you have this first film, Alien, right? Directed by Ridley Scott, who was not a major name in Hollywood at this point. He directed commercials in this film, The Duelist, right? But then he makes that film and becomes a major name, obviously. Okay. Then you have James Cameron, who comes on to Aliens, and he had made The Terminator, and that was a huge hit, and he worked on the script for First Blood Part 2. So, he was getting name recognition, and he did work on John Carpenter movies and stuff like that. So then we get to the third film, which had a terrible production, but they hired David Fincher, a famous music video director at the time, who was getting a lot of hype and went on to have a very successful film career. Okay, so if you don't know, the end of Alien 3, Ripley dies. They kill off Ellen Ripley, right? The main protagonist of the series after 3 films. So when Alien 3 ends, you're pretty much like, oh, well, they can't really make a sequel to this. And if they do, they're going to have to do something completely different. They can't make another Alien movie. Here's the biggest flaw with the entire Alien franchise, going back to even Aliens on some level, but I don't really hold a grudge against this with Aliens because I think it was dynamic enough in what it did. It separates it. They're all kind of the same movie. Alien just keeps getting remade. It's always some crew of people go somewhere they shouldn't. Xenomorph gets loose. Some evil company scientist or someone's trying to collect the alien or the eggs. And then Ripley or some other lead character in the movie has to fight against it. And, I mean, Prometheus is like, well, honestly, the only one that doesn't follow the pattern of the Alien franchise. And that's why I give Prometheus a little bit of credit in that regard. Is that it doesn't just follow the exact same pattern. It still has a lot of cliches from Alien. But it's like every Alien movie, they just fucking try to redo Alien. They're like, oh, let's do close quarters. They're stuck somewhere. The Xeno's on the ship and is going to kill them and all that. I mean, it's seriously, that's what the first 4 films are. And Aliens can kind of get away with that because it's a sequel and it goes back to LV-426 and it continues the storyline years later and it shows you new parts of LV-426 that you hadn't seen and it expands with the Queen Alien stuff. Alien 3 and Alien Resurrection are just... The problem with them is that the ideas that are so unique to them as a film, that keep them separate from the other films in the franchise, are some of the worst things about them, or some of the most poorly executed things. While the good things about the movie, which are, in this movie, in my mind, few and far in between. I'm actually not a very big Resurrection fan. I know some people think this movie's fun, and they give it a pass and think it's a lot better than Alien 3, and that was kind of the reception at the time, was that it was better than Alien 3. It didn't do any better at the box office. It made $160 million worldwide, and the budget was $75 million, so it was a higher budget. Now, let's get into the director, though, because that's one of the elements that makes this film such a strange thing. This was directed by Jean-Pierre Jeunet. Right? If you don't know who that is, he made Amélie, one of the most famous films of the last 10, 20 years, right? Gorgeous, beautiful movie. Before that, he was really getting recognition in art house circles for his wonderful film Delicatessen and The City of Lost Children, which I highly recommend, especially if you're a fan of the work of Guillermo del Toro or Peter Jackson. Very similar filmmaker in a lot of ways, has a Looney Tunes influence, but one of the best world builders I've ever seen. Honestly, on paper, a perfect pick for an Alien film. Joss Whedon wrote this movie, of Avengers fame, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Angel, Firefly. Now, if you watch this channel, you know I'm not the biggest Joss Whedon fan. I have a lot of problems with his work overall. But he's even a good choice for an Alien film, because he could write good character dialogue, interactions, and honestly, I could see him doing something close to what they did in '79 with the script. I could honestly see Whedon writing something that has that same kind of... I don't know, the rapport of the characters in the original Alien and the way they all feel workman-like. It's very Firefly. I think he could have got away with that. I think if you could picture Nathan Fillion in this movie, right, and the crew of the Serenity in this movie, and you know, if you could picture them with good dialogue fighting off a xenomorph, there could be a movie here, right? Okay, so this is strange for the reason that it has a great visual filmmaker who like Fincher went on to make great movies after this, right? He didn't just, this wasn't like he came and made a bad movie and then went off and became a nobody. He made Amelie his most famous film, you know? So there's not a lack of talent here. I have to say that Alien 3 and Alien Resurrection have to be a case of studio interference. There's just no way around it. We know that for Alien 3, but there's no way Alien Resurrection is the same thing, because you see a filmmaker you know is good at telling stories, or at least being unique and interesting. And it's not that this film isn't unique or interesting, because by God it is. This is one of the ugliest, strangest, phantasmagorical, clusterfucks, genre hybrid, over-the-top movies I've ever seen. I mean, it really is. I first saw this when I was young. Really young. It was, in fact, it might have been, I think the first Alien film I saw was Aliens, then I saw Alien, then I saw Alien 3, and I watched this really young, though, like 10, 11. I can't quite remember when I first saw it. It scared the shit out of me. I'm not gonna lie, I think this movie has scary scenes. I think it has actually a lot more scary scenes and a horror factor than Alien 3. I think Alien 3 is a better movie. I'm not saying it's the worst movie, but this film, there's moments, there's kind of this swimming xenomorph underwater sequence that's a good idea. I really think it's a good idea. And there's moments. But man, you talk about just a bunch of people coming together and it not working. There's some times when a movie's made where that screenwriter, like, let's use The Social Network as an example. Okay, Aaron Sorkin comes in, he takes a book, it's about Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook, and then he gives it that Aaron Sorkin punch. Gives it great dialogue, gives it a lot of themes, makes it work cinematically. Then you hire a guy like David Fincher, who takes that material and does something else with it. Then you cast actors that you wouldn't really think of in roles like this, like Justin Timberlake and Jesse Eisenberg. All these elements come together and then make a great film, because all those choices were right? This is one of those films where the way Whedon's script is written, the fact that they wanted him to do a movie about Ripley after she died in Alien 3, which is the dumbest decision this movie makes, is to bring Ripley back. There is no screenwriter out there who could have made this work. I am not blaming Joss Whedon at all for this. How the fuck do you make a clone Ripley blood sample thing work? It's just stupid. There's no way to not make that stupid. Even if you sold it and the movie was badass, that would still be something that people would complain about as stupid. It would just be like, oh my god, I can't believe that's a thing. Winona Ryder's really bad in this movie. This was this period in the 90s when she's just started to give really shitty performances, when she just stopped giving a fuck for like 10 years. I don't know why. She used to be good. Yeah, it's even a great cinematographer worked on this film, who has a great career, and I don't like the look of this film. That's what I'm saying. It's all these things came together in a bad way. The way the producers handled this movie, the way it's shot, the way it's written, the way the performers are in it, all of it together does the opposite thing of what a movie should do. It makes you uncomfortable, and it's a hard movie to watch. Some people say this is a really fun action movie that moves quick and has a lot of little fun moments and is more I don't know, more lively than Alien 3. I can get that sentiment, and I actually do enjoy the movie on some level, especially when I was younger. I used to be able to watch this movie and laugh at it. Now it kind of bores me, especially the first half of the movie I find really boring. Some of the, I mean, I wish, I'm so scared of copyright. I wish I could show clips from this movie. There's insane fucking scenes in this movie, the way it's filmed and shot. It's just like, what the fuck is this? Like, where they go inside people's mouths and crap and go, I mean, it's crazy. It's just like a director doing like anything he wants with a camera and not thinking about it, just being crazy for the sake of it. It's weird because, like I said, on paper, Jeunet is terrific choice for this, just like Fincher was. Like, I'm like, fuck, of course I want that guy to do Alien. I want an Alien film that looks like Delicatessen. And he was so good with gore, and, I mean, so many things. Ron Perlman's in this movie. It should kick ass. It really should. It's such a hard film to review and discuss, like I said, because there's so much context that has to go with it, that they made this film after Alien 3, that they brought Ripley back, that they hired this director, a foreign director. It's a lot of little things that I think make this movie the way it is. That makes it stand out. But standing out's not always the best thing to do. Like, okay, let's say a beautiful woman walks at a party, and she's gorgeous, and she stands out. That's one way to stand out. Then there's the guy who's like the goofy guy who comes in and acts like a drunk asshole the whole night, annoys everyone. He's standing out too, just in a different way. So here's a quote from Joss Whedon, right? And this is something Joss Whedon is doing, which I typically don't like, is when he takes all criticism of his work and puts it on the people who directed or wrote the movie. He does this a lot. He did this with Bryan Singer's X-Men. He's like, well, they didn't say the line right. I can kind of get what he means, but it's like he can't admit that sometimes he writes shitty lines. Like, I've read the original script Joss Whedon wrote for this movie and how many times the studio had him act. I mean, the script's just kind of bad. This isn't a good script. I don't blame Joss Whedon for it. I'm not. I mean, he kept getting notes, but it's kind of like him being like, well, they did a bad. I agree with the sentiment here. They did every wrong thing they could do, but it's not like he wrote a great script that could have been saved by a good director. Anyone would have filmed this and it wouldn't have worked. It's just not. There's the material's not there. The character work, the development, the themes. The idea with Ripley being the mother to this baby alien, all that shit's stupid. It's just to even write that stuff and try to think of that working visually is insane. It's stuff that could maybe work in a comic book. I can see that. But in a movie, it's like, oh, dude. Really? Worst android of the series is in this movie, too, by far. It wasn't a question of doing everything differently, although they changed the ending. It was mostly a matter of doing everything wrong. They said the lines mostly, but they said them all wrong. And they cast it wrong, and they designed it wrong, and they scored it wrong. They did everything wrong that they could possibly do. There's actually a fascinating lesson in filmmaking, because everything that they did reflects back to the script, or looks like something from the script. And people assume that if I hated it, then they changed the script. But it wasn't so much that they changed the script, it's just that they executed it in such a ghastly fashion as to render it almost unwatchable. Now, I think he's kind of taking some of the blame off himself, but that sentiment there, that they executed it in such a ghastly fashion as to render it almost unwatchable, that's exactly how I feel about this movie. I totally agree with that point. That's a beautifully worded point by Joss Whedon. Every little decision in this film, from an editing, framing, special effects standpoint, makes it hard to look at. I know not everyone's going to agree with this, which is fine. Some people, like the looks of films opposed to others. I don't like the look of this film. And this is a filmmaker I like a lot. I think he's shot some of the best looking films in recent years. But this is like, whoa. The fact that the movie starts as this strange, kind of jumping back into the alien universe, and then introducing the mercenaries and these over-the-top scientists. Even though Brad Dourif's always fun to watch. I'm never going to hate on Brad Dourif, but these odd sequences that feel... I mean, they're trying to get back to Giger stuff, and that's what I like about this movie. There are things I like. Sigourney Weaver's really good in this. She's always good. But she's actually really good in this. Like, it's a really good performance. It's actually kind of underrated when you watch Alien Resurrection. You're like, man, Weaver's kind of killing it in this. It's a sex... And she has to do some terrible scenes in this where, like, she has to shoot the basketball and, act sexual and stuff. And they're really awkward scenes in the way they're directed and stuff. But she's still... Kudos to her for just jumping into the material and not just giving, like, a cash-in performance. She actually puts a lot of work into it. And, that's one thing I'll always say about Sigourney Weaver. She'll put a movie on her shoulders and try and carry it. And she can. Okay, so, I remember there's just flashes of things from this movie that always stick with me. The wheelchair guy, the guy hanging on him when he falls off into the water. There's kills. This movie's like stuck in my head. Like, I can't forget it, but it does try to go back to the physical element, which I do think is kind of lacking in Alien somewhat. There's a lack of a physical element to it that's the body horror. This movie has a lot of it. It's just, man, there's something about the way it's filmed and done that isn't that great. It doesn't give you that feeling it should, and I don't know why. It feels off. It feels like you're watching some weird European film that doesn't really translate to American audiences and didn't really work. It's weird. It only reminds me of a few films I've seen, and they're all that way. They're like these Italian films I've seen or something that I couldn't really get totally what they were doing, because they were completely like in a different culture. So that's how it feels. It feels like the sensibilities of this film aren't American at all, which I wouldn't mind. But I can't make fucking heads or tails of it. The ending is strange. I know they get to Earth at the end. I remember that. Because after 4 Alien films, it took us to get back to fucking Earth. We couldn't get to Earth. Like, couldn't you get to Earth like halfway into this movie? Wouldn't it be cool if Alien Resurrection for the first half was on the ship, and then halfway through they got to Earth, and then it was like a fucking big action movie? I respect that they tried to keep it small and keep it in the corridors and you know, keep it more stealthy and stuff like the original Alien, and they tried to bring back the fun space marine action aspect of Aliens, which Whedon was probably very suited for. But come on, this is this is that film I just can never get on with. Like, I can get why people like Alien 3. I don't like it that much, but I can get it with the dialogue and what they were trying to do. This movie, even what they were trying to do, I don't like. I don't like the idea of this movie. I don't like it as a concept. I think it's a terrible idea for a movie. I hate the title Alien Resurrection. It's such one of those cliche movie titles. I remember Winona Ryder's awful in this fucking movie. I remember liking it. I mean, like I said, I haven't seen it in a long time. I've seen it a few times. But I just have a hard time watching this movie. I don't enjoy it anymore. Sometimes it comes on TV, and I own the Blu-ray, but I own all the Blu-rays. And I just, man, I can't. It's hard for me to sit down and watch that movie. Be like, oh, I'm gonna watch Alien Resurrection tonight, even if I was drunk or something. Because it's not the dumbest film, and it doesn't do the dumbest things necessarily, and it's not even the worst film in some ways of the franchise. But it's all about feeling with movies a lot of the time, how movies make you feel. You know, that's what I talk about a lot. Movies are a bunch of technical things to manipulate feelings, and a good director, a good writer, they work really hard, and actors, to manipulate you, to make you feel or think about the things they want you to think or see or feel or laugh at. This film, to me, is one of those movies where I feel like they failed in every aspect in that way of editing, of writing, of filming, all that stuff that makes a movie. I think like this movie gets all of those things wrong in a way that only a great filmmaker could make a bad movie. Tarantino said this once when he saw Bonfire of the Vanities by Brian De Palma. He said that's a terrible movie that only a great director could make. And I know what he means, because when you watch that movie, there's brilliant cinematography and sequences and parts of it that really work. It's kind of a mess. It's like when Francis Ford Coppola makes a bad movie, you know? It's something only... There's sometimes someone has to be really talented to fuck up in a certain way. Sometimes people are so good at something that when they go the wrong path, be it a musician, an artist, any kind of artist, they could do something that's so insane and doesn't work because they got too caught up in something, or they got influenced by a producer, or they didn't figure it out. You'll see this all the time. This is one of those cases. A great filmmaker had to make this movie. A mediocre hack director couldn't have shot and done this movie in the way it is. A group of untalented actors couldn't have just come together and done this way. It takes talent to make a movie like this, where it's a fucking disaster with so much to it. People don't seem to realize this. You have to be really good to fuck up and make a movie. It's not like Zack Snyder, right, where he makes Man of Steel or Batman v Superman, and they're just boring and terrible and not well thought out. These films, you could tell people were really trying to make a good movie, and they still messed up. And those are the most insane films you'll ever watch. And Joss Whedon makes a good point. You want to learn how to make a movie. Watch movies like this. You'll learn so much more from this than you will watching great films, because you're just going to start trying to copy the shots and mimic those filmmakers and follow their patterns and look at their themes. When you watch a film that doesn't work, but had a lot of good things behind, a lot of good people behind it, you can see where they made the mistakes or where you could possibly fix them. And fixing those mistakes is being a filmmaker. So this is a great film to study, more than maybe some of the other films in that way, because it shows you what not to do. And you can really break down why they shouldn't do this. This film really deserves a deep essay and analysis breaking down all of those elements about why it doesn't work. It deserves that kind of look. I mean, it's that interesting. It's not like Alien versus Predator, where it's just like, oh, Paul W. Sanderson made a really shitty, B movie. This shouldn't be a shitty B movie. The fact that it is, with everyone involved, is what makes it so nuts. So those are the kind of movies where you really learn when a filmmaker fucks up. That's when you really learn when the right decisions need to be made too. And that's something I would give advice to anyone, and it's really helped me in my life, is looking at the screw-ups as much as the things that were successful. Because you'll see the pattern then. That's really it. There's patterns that you'll see in bad movies that you can learn not to follow. You go, okay, I realize these decisions are too risky in this way. And a consistent director like a David Fincher after this, or you know, a Paul Thomas Anderson, you know, they learn to try to avoid those things as much as they can from movie to movie. This I guess I would compare when John Woo came over to America and made, you know, Broken Arrow and that kind of stuff. But this is way crazier than that shit. Man, I want to say I like this movie. I don't want to be someone who's shitting on the whole Alien franchise, because I like the first 3 movies well enough, and I want to like this movie. I really do. But it's so bizarre. And it's not bizarre in that way like Fantastic Planet, a movie from the 70s that I love for being bizarre in that way. Which I actually think has the best set design of all time. Some of that stuff, like, I think surpasses some of Giger's work in Alien. If you ever get a chance to see A Fantastic Planet, an animated from the early 70s, you want to see incredible art design. It's insane. It's a beautiful movie. I think Jodorowsky actually worked on it. But this is one of those movies where there's so much artistry being put into it, and it's all vomit. It's visual vomit. And that doesn't happen often with movies. It's a rare case when you see a movie come out like that, where it's really that way. So it's fascinating, but at the same time, this really was a big hit to the franchise, because people thought, well, after Alien 3, you know, which disappointed a lot of people, they can at least come back with this movie and, you know, fix it and realize the mistakes they made. Then they made even bigger mistakes. And ultimately, the franchise kind of just stayed off the waves for a while until we got AVP and then all that shit. Now Ridley Scott's back. But this was the wrong direction to go completely. This was a bad idea. And it's something that Fox is going to have to think about for a long time. Because this was probably the movie more than the other ones where they really fucked up the ability to keep this franchise going, because once again they had to center it around Ripley and the same stuff we've seen before, instead of actually doing something different and giving us a new thing in the franchise and bringing in a new fan base. The franchise was still very popular when this film came out, and people still really liked Weaver, but I can tell you that this is the point when these 2 films came out that the Alien series really lost its reputation as being kind of this above average, really the high art level of the sci-fi action genre. They were kind of considered the high level, the god tier. And even people, you know, were like, well, hey, Alien 3 still got a lot of good things about it. But then this movie came out and it was like, oh, we've gone into complete schlock. It's weird. It didn't resurrect the franchise. It buried it, if anything. I want to... You know, it's just not a very good movie. I could go into certain scenes. I could go into more characters. I could go into what it tries to talk about rebirth and stuff like that. But it's really not worth it. It's such a generic movie at points. But then at other times, it's really just awful. So tell me what you think in the comments. Give me your opinion on this movie. Let's figure this out together. Sorry if this review wasn't as funny or as informative as that of your other ones, but I really don't have a lot to say about this movie. I can only... this the best I could do is try to describe it this way, too. It's just fucking weird. It's just a weird movie. I've never really been able to figure it out. Maybe one day it'll click with me and I'll be like, masterpiece! I see it now! You know, but... It more like reminds me of like when David Lynch makes a bad movie that I don't like, or a crazy one, or it reminds me of David Lynch's Fire Walk with Me, the Twin Peaks movie. That's really fucking weird. There's just or one of the Nightmare on Elm Street films, the sequels, not the first one, but the ones that are like the 5th one that's just kind of gross and a strange movie, and Freddy's just just exists in it. And it's kind of just like, what is this movie? There's films like that, and this is one of them. Thank you for watching.